share this with others potentially.
Do you wait a couple of minutes for the previous sessions to get started, or
maybe we just wait. No, we were the only session at the moment, but people might be coming back from the lunch break. Yeah, let's make it a slow start. Maybe. Stefan already grabbing coffees and whatever else we need. Stefan already posted that his devices are running out of juice, so he'll involuntarily drop out, unfortunately. But yeah,
I'm still here, and I'm looking at my phone. I have a power bank, but it's all running out, and relying on the solar energy in this area is a summer house, and I'm actually happy to not be on the grid, because it connects you very much to what's going on. And even if I'm here later in the year, I have to think about that. In the summer, you have all the energy. In the winter time, you have to think about it. It's like you don't have energy. Now, I think this is a little bit maybe it's what we are coming from here in our conversation. Where are the resources? How can we use them the best way? Is super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that requires a lot of imagination to come up with new ways of thinking about that. So
yeah, Thomas, I'm actually writing you a personal message here, but I'm just gonna say it out loud to the whole group. So basically, it was about asking if I'm running a boot camp. I run many boot camps in Africa for entrepreneurs, and this is together with Siemens Stiftung. And for some reasons, we have had mentors becoming sick, and then we have to replace a mentor too. And I would like to also create a super boot camp in Kenya, the first physical boot camp where we come together. Everything have been virtual here, and I like the physical part of meeting much more than the virtual. Of course, this is great, and I think this has been wonderful and inspiring so far. But I'm actually thinking of if there would be any people in this group that would be interested in becoming an expert or mentor on the program here. And then we will do a boot camp in Kenya, where we'll fly you to Kenya for 5 days. 18 to 22nd of October. It just came up in my, I had to do something about it recently, 2 days ago, and I thought, okay, perhaps I could ask in this group, because here I'm dealing with people who are working with social impact businesses and understand the whole concept. And it's not often I can get an expert, but they are very good in business, but they don't understand the whole social impact setting. So I'm asking here in the group if anyone feel they could be an expert at a boot camp in October for social impact businesses. It's a super boot camp we are doing in Kenya. So
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for putting that out. And so you heard Stefan. I think Stefan's information is also on our spreadsheet. Did you add yourself there? I'm
not sure if I'm on the spreadsheet, but
I'm going to send a link here just now, so you can reach out. And Stefan and I, let's have a conversation later and see whether we can spread this all further. So
yeah, I'm sorry if I went beyond what
don't worry.
you wanted with the boot with this day. Anyway, it's out there.
Let's open the stage for Julia now, and her opening us for imaginations into solving all of these world's problems. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Thomas. Super excited to be here with you all today. as I mentioned, I was very excited to like find others that potentially are in the same kind of journey of really looking at the challenges and rewards that we have as impact entrepreneurs, because I do consider that regardless if we're entrepreneurs or investors, in a way or another, we end up like being entrepreneurs because there's still so much to be shaped within the whole impact space. So maybe just like a little bit of like context of like, who am I, where I'm coming from, and like where this topic actually emerged from. So I'm originally Brazilian. I've been living in Berlin now for 4 years. And essentially, I started my career as an entrepreneur, not so impact driven, but innovation driven. Failed, went into banking, learned the trade there, and then had actually a pretty bad burnout that made me rethink things. And essentially, that's when I realized that I was getting really far away from my personal values in comparison to my professional life. So decided to leave banking. Didn't get it right the first time around. I went to work for Rocket Internet. Many of you might know of Rocket here in Europe. I was working with them like back in Brazil. And really, it wasn't the kind of culture, the kind of like mindset that I admire. And I think that they actually spread a lot of things within like the venture and tech world that sometimes we as impact people have to really fight against. But then it was a good experience to be like on the operational side as well. But I left and I joined actually Professor Muhammad Yunus. So I think no further explanations required about Yunus. So I was running Yunus Social Business in Brazil, the accelerators, and also structuring the fund there for some time. I do have like my restrictions when it comes to like social business. That's why I ended up like moving into impact investment. And I became a partner at Vox Capital, which was the first VC doing impact in Brazil, investing in fintech, health tech, ed tech. Nowadays, they really went like beyond just that to actually become almost like an asset manager of like different kinds. But then in 2017, for family reasons, my husband and I had to like move to Berlin, and that leaving the fund in 2018. And since then, I had been like working quite a bit with the whole like impact ecosystem, be it startups, accelerators, like investors, and also trying to like really bridge this gap between the mainstream and the impact world, right? I think as like Lee was saying, there is still like a big bridge that we have to create and really like narrow down what is it that the mainstream understands as impact. And even within like the impact industry, so many times we have like different perceptions and understandings of what the word and the concept actually means. And why are we like looking at something else? I then bumped into my now co-founder to create what today is Remagine. And Remagine is the first digital business bank that is really looking to accelerate impact in the mainstream. So we're super excited to launch our bank accounts now in October, or actually September even. So we'll be happy to onboard as many of you with special conditions, because what we want to show is that actually if you're impact driven, you can also have economic and financial benefits at the end of the day. And essentially, I think I've been through this kind of journey on the investor side and also on the entrepreneur side. And lately, sometimes I have like these like pressing feelings of like, there are like so many challenges that we have to face. And there are like so many dissonances even with like impact investors. And when Thomas was talking about like an conference, I said, wow, maybe that's the perfect opportunity to come together with others to actually like discuss what kind of like challenges do you actually see? What kind of rewards do you see? And I will be happy to actually like share how I've been seeing this from, quite some early days, I would say. Now it's been almost like 8 years working in this field from different perspectives, and sharing also how I see the evolution of like how the challenges actually change throughout time. Some actually didn't really change so much, I would say. And then like just like diving deeper and being connected to all of you. So there's a little bit of me. Given that we're not so many, maybe we could get like a few moments to get you to say who you are, where you're coming from. So are you in the impact investing space, impact business? Are you just like curious about the topic? I don't know, all of you here. So it would be great if we could go through like a quick round. Who would like to start? I will get, let me see, Felipe? I will start like calling people out.
Yeah, don't worry. I just had to close the door quickly. Yeah, so I'm kind of a little bit in both worlds of like impact investing and impact business or a startup. So basically, what I'm trying is to build a company that makes impact investing more accessible and feasible for retail investors, right? Because well, without going too much into detail, would be too long, but I think right now it's very cumbersome and difficult for retail investors. So basically just anyone who wants to invest small sums of money, and small here being anything below 200,000 euros per investment, is quite difficult, inaccessible, difficult, and oftentimes not even possible. So I'm trying to make that more accessible, and right now I'm looking for a co-founder for that.
Exciting. Nice to meet you. Who will be next? Like maybe Stefan, because you already started a little bit before.
And me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And I might run out of battery here. So thank you. Yeah. I have been involved in Africa and startup businesses for quite a while. I'd say 5 years. Before that, I started up my own businesses, 2 or 3 businesses. I learned everything about that. tough life. And right now, I realize my future is going into supporting anything that can have to do with supporting startups, with all my learnings, with all my network, and I believe I have a massive network that can help. So somehow getting involved with projects. I'm working for Impact currently. I'm also working on my own projects for the future, and this will bring, I say, any interesting projects. I want to work on any interesting projects that can connect both to the groundwork that I've been doing for the last 5 years by being in Africa, working with startups, creating boot camps. So somehow realizing how can we make this innovation and new tech ideas more come through via our different networks. And I mean, even what was tabled here today. So any connections, I believe I have a good background. I have the connections into the ecosystem in many East Africa, West Africa, South Africa, North Africa. So I'm pretty much in all of Africa.
Lovely.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Who'd go next? I don't see people, so I don't know if I should call you out if you're around or not. So I don't know, Bettina, or that I can see the name, or Raphael. The idea would be just like together, like where people are coming from. Jörg, right?
Yeah, since nobody is showing up, here we go.
Yeah.
So, nice to see you again. So yeah, we've met in another impact investing context.
Did.
So my name is Jörg. I've been working at the intersection of innovation and sustainability for quite a while. Also worked in executive education in the UK, where we developed leadership development programs of different kinds. Also developed a training program on impact investing during my stay in the Bay Area a few years ago, and more recently been freelancing and consulting in various projects in that bigger area of innovation and sustainability.
Lovely. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to share? Thomas.
Yes, with pleasure. Yeah, it took me forever to just come up with a short way of saying what I want to do, and so the really short version is I'm doing everything in my power to move towards a good future for everyone, and that everyone includes all life on this planet, not only humans. And the way I the way my working hypothesis at this moment is that we have to create islands of the future as far out as possible from the current mode of doing things, and as close as necessary to get them done. And specifically, I'm focused with one project called Motherland on creating something we would call, or you can imagine as a operating system for rural villages in Africa to allow those villages to become more self-sufficient and self-reliant. That is one of my core activities, but there are many others. But I want to leave some space for others to also show what they're doing. So maybe who wants to take over? Felipe or Gregor or Philip? You're the guys I see here right now.
Don't be shy, people. That's supposed to be a conversation among friends. Bettina, maybe? Well, if not, I think we can, yeah, people will be invited over. In your opinion, what would you say are the biggest challenges that impact entrepreneurs actually face?
Are you asking all of us?
Mm-hmm, pretty much.
Okay.
I also had a Slido, but I think it's going to be more fun if we just like talk. Maybe we can try the Slido as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, also kind of from the stage that I'm at right now, but I'd definitely say one of the most challenging things, if not the most challenging thing, unless you already happen to have the right person as co-founder, is finding the right co-founder. Right? Because some people are lucky and you just have them, or you somehow meet them by chance, but if not, I think that's really hard and really difficult. And that's usually a stage that you don't get much support at, because there is no money in basically helping people find their co-founders. And all these incubation programs and stuff, they usually start, they want to increase the odds if you're making it. So they usually start after you have a co-founder. So there's very few that actually want you if you don't. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Cool. I will also like open a Slido just in case people are like shy to go through and just like talk. Thomas actually wrote money. Yeah. Money is also a big challenge, at least. I would say that many times, especially when we're talking about like impact, is positioning, especially if you're trying to like bring something that is like innovative to the table. How is it that you properly describe what you're doing? How is it that you bridge actually to concepts that people know? Some other challenges that I've been through have been, of course, like as Jörg is saying, like another challenge, target conflicts, maximizing profit and impact outcomes. Definitely. Measuring outcomes. Yeah. One challenge that I also came in contact with was like this discussion between depth and scale of impact, right? So I think this is like another one that sometimes you say, wow, can I have a super deep solution in the impact level, or should it be a broader one, maybe a bit more shallow? I think that's another one. Anyone would dare sharing something more? Otherwise, we just to get it like warmed up. And what are like some of the rewards that actually impact entrepreneurs face?
Can I give a comment here?
Of course.
So I'm not sure the connection is so good here. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm. We can hear you well.
Yeah, so my involvement with a lot of startups in Africa is that, yes, we have to measure, and we do it much better today than we did 4 years ago, 3 years ago. But we also do to, you know, maybe not our own targets or, you know, KPIs. And sometimes I'm wondering if I spent, or my experts or the experts we are finding spend some time with a startup, then we know this, and we realize the startup is really achieving something. And sometimes we haven't had a contact with a startup we've been working with for a year, and we realize a lot of things happen. I'm in this whole you can say situation where we are saying, how much should you invest your time in measuring, documenting, or sometimes some mentor, one-on-one mentoring can actually change a lot. So some of our startups have actually become real influencers in the ecosystem. And is there anything better than creating influencers in the ecosystem? I'm thinking, if we want to scale, how do we scale? Do we scale by our own systems, or can we also look at it as scaling in terms of creating influencers in the ecosystem as the ecosystem is working?
Definitely. Maybe I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, what I would say is, like, maybe I can also like share a little bit, and then we go into like different kind of like points. I was like trying to do like a retrospective with my impact career from like Unus times, Vox times, Remagine times. And I think that one of the challenges that I've seen over and over again has been really keeping the vision, because at the end of the day, we are still like innovating, and many times the mainstream won't get it. People and peers won't actually get it. And how is it that you keep the vision on one side while trying to also pay the bills on the other side, right? I think it's like this challenge of like coming up with like business models that have some kind of component of innovation while still connecting to what people understand and know. And here, for instance, like a quick example of the dilemma we had early days at Vox, when we knew what we wanted to be as like a VC that, or a fund that is focused on impact, but the closest that we could get to explaining to people so that they could quickly understand what we were doing was like, okay, we're a venture capital fund. But at the end of the day, we were going to question ourselves, like, is it truly so? Is it our end goal to be a venture capital fund? And in Portuguese, we actually have like two meanings for the same verbs, which is to be. One is like a state of being, and the other one is transitory. And what we like came up with was like, well, we are using the meaning that is, we are like a transitory kind of venture capital fund, right? Because right now, that's the easiest way of actually telling people what we're doing. Because if we went to the other way, well, we're focused on impact and the structure we use is like investing in equity, then you just like lose people. But at the same time, people will put you into a certain box. And then what will that actually bring as influence to you by being put into a certain box, right? I think this is where, for me, it comes like this positioning kind of challenge and the convincing others, where sometimes really for you to get like something out of the ground, you have to convince others. And many times the easiest way is like analogy. What is it that they know that we can use as a reference? And many times that won't do you much more of like a favor, but still, it is a way of getting the conversation started. So how is it that sometimes you actually use these examples and then not get lost in the vision, not get lost in how is it that you want to execute, right? And I think that, for instance, with Reimagine is like, wow, are you only working with the change makers? Like, no, we want to work also with the change makers but above all with everybody else, and help them get into an impact journey. And many times people just like look at us and like, do I get you? Where is it that you want to go with this? Is there a market for that? Is it big enough? And then here's where I was like saying that many times what Rocket ended up like doing by just like copy pasting like business models doesn't do us like much of a favor when we're trying to like innovate in business models, because people say, well, you're not replicating anything. You're not just like copy and pasting something. And then it's just like, well, not really. And the response that we have, and even sometimes from impact investors, is like, is this proven? Does it work? How can I see something similar? You know, what are like the KPIs that you have at hand? How is it that you're going to measure? And then you really can go into like this kind of like rabbit hole of saying, well, there is like so much that I can tell you that we have to try out. And that's still why we talk about like a venture or a startup, right? So I think that this is like one of the challenges that I've personally been through in the different like situations. And I don't know of your journeys and your stories of like trying to explain. And like Thomas, I think you just like mentioned, yeah, like now it took me so long to actually come to something more simple to define what is it that I'm doing, and how is it that actually this looks like in practice, right? I don't know, what was your journey to actually get to this kind of, you know, the short description, and are people getting that?
Well, I think it reflects a lot of what you're saying. As somebody who is concerned about the current scale of the problem, which is planetary, you always find yourself in a position where you have to ask systemic questions. And if you start asking systemic questions, people look at you like you're nuts, right? Because it cuts very deep into habits and institutions and our modus operandi that we're engaging with at this point. So and then you get a lot of pushback. And creating a language, finding a language that that is a balance between being out there and trying to actually tackle these big problems, being humble about what you're actually tackling, but at the same time being able to speak at least enough of the language of the current MO is it took me, I'd say minimum 5 years of experimentation to get halfway, right? And I'm still not there, right? So but yeah. I over the time I learned to care less. That's also maybe a relevant aspect in this.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think it's like 5 years of experimentation is like the pivoting concept along the way, right? I think when we're really like focused on trying to solve something that can be really big and very much entrenched in everything that we know as it is, you might need to pivot. And even like, and when you pivot, it's hurtful many times because people say, wow, but you were doing this, it didn't work. It's like, yeah, well, you have to be humble and say, yeah, it didn't work the way we wanted. So we have to change it a little bit. And that's like the new iteration and where this is going. And then there is a process that sometimes it's just like, okay, I have to take a step back. And who are the people that actually understand and can be with you on this journey, right? So I think that what you said, like Thomas, about the systemic change, for me, it's a lot about this, like, how is it that we can bridge more the mainstream to the impact world, right? I think this became sort of like an obsession of mine in the past years, where I love talking to impact entrepreneurs, but who else is talking to the non-impact entrepreneurs? Because we're still like, a limited group, so to say, but there's like so much technology, so much innovation being developed out there that is just, as Lee was saying, like tech for tech. And how is it that we bring like many more people into this conversation? So, and here for me, this bridging the mainstream with the impact world also brings the question and the challenge of how much impact do you have at scale, or how much impact do you have in the depth of things, right? So I'd say that when working with Vox, I think we could have like very deep impact, because at the end of the day, like a fund will have how many companies in the portfolio? 15, 20 companies. So it can be really focused. And now what we're doing with Reimagine, we want to like work with like thousands, hundreds of thousands of companies, but meaning that I will need to develop much more like automation and, you know, like frameworks that allow me to put like many more people into the same kind of bucket to make them go through the stream of like what impact can mean to their companies. And sometimes say, wow, is it like deep enough? And I think it was like one of like the questions that I had to answer to myself and with the team is like, wow, I think for now we need to make a choice. And sometimes people can also like look at you, especially like people that are like super deep into the impact world. Is that enough? Is it impact enough? So, wow, if you want to question like a system, maybe you can't just start like super deep. You have to start at a certain kind of like level and slowly start to go deeper, right? So I think for us, it's a lot about like questioning what's the status quo of the financial industry. Why is it that products like in the financial industry, like banks at large, actually exist? What are they doing? Where the money is going? How are they using money as incentives for what kind of behavior? So we'll even go into the discussion about, you know, capital markets. And I think that especially when we're looking at impact, a lot of what we're doing won't have results right away, right around the corner, right? I think it's a lot about like the lenses that you have that's like in the short term, maybe there is something that is like detrimental for returns. But at the long term, this is like what should be done, you know? So I think that many times, for instance, when we're talking about like the whole like positioning around impact, and I get like the question from investors saying, even impact investors, but how much lower do you think your CAC or your cost of acquisition of clients is going to be? Like, well, that's a very good question. If you look at, you know, a very short term, maybe it can be even a bit higher because I do have other impact components that other players they don't have. But if you look at the long term, if you talk about engagement and advocacy and really like building things up with your clients, I'm going to reduce this a long time. And then people say, well, but yeah, for the next valuation, it's like, wow, should we be looking at valuation or should we be looking at how many companies are actually getting into this impact journey, right? So I think that these kind of challenges of bringing to the table something that questions what people know and understand are always like very tricky. At least that's what I found, and very, very exciting at the same time, right? Because you have to put your head to work much more into this direction. And Felipe, I don't know, how has your journey been so far, for instance, because you're also like trying to like bridge this gap of like giving access to people on how they actually look at their investments by allowing them to look also into impact options, which are not really something accessible right now. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm not really there yet because I don't have a product prototype yet, right? I've just been speaking to people, but yeah, definitely. It's I mean, my background is also in finance, and then also oftentimes friends come and ask me about stuff because they know that that's my background, and also they of course know that I'm doing this right now and speaking to people and researching this, and it really is. I really think it is very difficult to find good products in that area that really can. I think it's really difficult to make that trade-off, like how much impact do you want to have and how much do you want to work with products that are that work for the masses, right? Because right now, I mean, there isn't that many good impact investing products that are open to retail investors. So you really have to make a trade-off. If you want to reach a lot of people, you have to go rather for so-called sustainable investing, but that does not mean that that really has a real impact. So yeah, it's difficult.
Anyone else here with like also the impact investor lens on how these challenges are perceived from your side as well? Please.
If I may, I just have a question because
of course.
the topic of how much impact always comes up, and my question in this area is there something like a minimum threshold to impact before I'm going to do something, or isn't it the case that if there is any impact at all, it's already a lot better than none? So, you know, I totally understand the question of, you know, how much is it, and, you know, what are the difficulties to measure it, be it CO2, be it biodiversity, or whatever it is. But from my perspective, the question is really, is there something like a minimum threshold?
I think that's a good point. I like a lot the framework that the Impact Management Project came up with, which is like the ABC, and understanding what is your intention, either as a business or as an investor, of saying, do I just want to get harmful stuff out of the plate? Do I want to act to properly avoid these harmful things? Do I want to work to benefit some kind of stakeholders? Or do I want to actually contribute with solutions to the specific issues we have at hand, right? I think this is always, like, for me, one of like the first things that I go into. It's just like, yeah, some impact is better than nothing, but then we have to see, is it truly impact or is it an externality? Is it just like trying to give something back, or is it something that is really like changing how you actually operate your core, right? I think we have a challenge with terminology, maybe, which can even be like placed within like positioning and how people perceive impact, because that's the origin of a lot of greenwashing, right? So meaning, do you want to have a business model that solves something, and then you figure out what is it that it's solving and how is it that you measure? Or do you just want to have like a business, and by the way, let me see what's around? You know, I'm trying to like treat my employees better. I'm trying to have a better selection process of suppliers and vendors, for instance. So I think that that's where it starts getting like, you know, to this like place where, can I consider this an impact business, or is just like a business that's trying to do something a bit better than the others, right? And here's where like this whole kind of like terminology and how people perceive and understand impact is still like a huge discussion, right, Thomas? Where you still have like this spectrum where everybody has their own definition. There are some kind of like initiatives trying to bring together, and I think like Gita is also a little bit of like one of those, like trying to say, okay, can we agree on some kind of concept? Can we agree on some kind of like direction at the end of the day? Because otherwise it gets like very tricky. I still think we are a bit like far from finding like a common global agreement, so to say. I think the closest that we are getting is still with like the GIN definition, so the Global Impact Investing Network, which says that to be an impact business or investment, it has to have the intentionality of generating both impact and financial returns at the same time. And if you measure financial returns, you should be also able to measure some kind of impact, right? So I think like to your question is like whatever's done, and that's a lot of like my perception nowadays of like bridging the mainstream, which is, can I help you do something better? Good, but just don't call yourself as an impact company, right? I think you still have like a long journey to go to properly rethink your business model, your core operation. How is it that you handle with like the whole value chain? And then even like defining who is it that you want to properly change the life at the end of the day with your business, right? So I think that that's where another challenge, right? So trying to bridge this gap, you sometimes might allow people that are still just like trying to ride on the wave to say, wow, but no, you know, like in our case, if they say, well, I bank with Remagine, what does it mean that you bank with Remagine? Is it just like, okay, I'm trying to signal that I'm being aware of like what's going on in the world? Am I trying to say that I pass any kind of filter? So on and so forth, you know? So this is how at least I perceive this topic of the question that you just posed.
Yeah. Thanks for the answer. It's really interesting. I think, you know, if we look at the definition of impact, the Google motto always comes back to my mind, you know, not doing evil. They never really defined what evil meant, but it worked quite well as well. So I think, you know, moving in this direction is definitely the right thing. And then, you know, and even as you said about externalities, right? If you get them into the business model, I think this is already another step forward, you know, even though probably not getting to where we all have to get, but you know, I'm a big fan of, you know, the first small steps, like, you know, acknowledging what's going on is already a good thing, because from if you don't do that, it's probably even further to get to somewhere. But again, thanks a lot, Julia.
Yeah, and maybe just like, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to say I would add one more thing, and I think what is really problematic is that usually it's totally overlooked, the question of whether some impact is, whether that's company impact or whether that's investor impact. So whether you as an investor can claim any impact by investing into an impactful company. And so I think, like, for example, when we speak about banking with Reimagine or so, when we're speaking about like smaller companies or companies that are not on listed markets, then I think it's much easier to claim that you as an investor have an impact by investing into, so let's say, good companies or impactful companies. But if we look at stock investing, I think it becomes very, very hard for you as an investor to claim to have impact by investing into an impactful company. And I think that is something that is usually completely left out of the discussion. And I think at least to me, it seems to be I don't know if you can call it impact washing, maybe that's too strong, but I think the marketing right now, oftentimes for any sort of listed equities, you know, like companies that kind of like, you know, like startups that kind of prepare you, or like advisors that prepare you funds of portfolios of listed equities and say these are impact, you know, this is impact investing if you invest into these companies, that usually completely leave this question out of sight. And I think that is I mean, to claim like, you know, you will be saving this, you know, I don't know, that number of CO2 or whatever, because you invest into this basket of companies on public markets. I think, yeah, that's pretty much for sure not the case. You might have some impact, but calling that impact investing and setting it, you know, as equal with like the impact that the company has, I think is pretty far off.
Yeah, I think there's like one component that we many times discuss, which is the additionality, right? So if your money wasn't there, what would be happening actually to that specific investment, right? Exactly. And I think that for me, that's where we also need to develop like many more like asset classes, and that's where I have like great fun discussing with Renee, for instance, of like how is it that we broaden up like the scope of what is it that we call impact investing, because the pure impact investing would be, okay, I'm investing in this specific kind of like startup. I'm an equity investor or a very early stage lender or something like that, where you can really like make it more tangible, where your money is making a difference, right? Because as you go like levels higher, it becomes much more complicated for you to say, wow, is it my euro that's making a difference or not at the end of the day? But meaning my intentionality is like, wow, it's like moving away from these kind of assets and actually going into, 100% portfolio that's like driven by impact, meaning I'm not creating anything, but at least I know that my money is where it's supporting the biggest impact, right? And I think that one concept that I think people need to still like, hold close to is like, am I impacting or am I simply reaching, right? Meaning, am I reaching this kind of population or am I properly impacting this kind of population? And here population meaning can be the environment, animals, people, whatever, but meaning potentially like investors in like public equities, they say, well, I know that my investment will have X amount of like reach, but I can't really claim what is the proper additionality of that consequence of that specific product and service, right? And I think that many times what we still like see happening around is like, well, I'm putting my money like to work and I believe it's doing that. So I am really generating impact. And then it's just like, question mark, is it truly? And even like for us who are like more, you know, the hardcore, like looking into like impact measurement, sometimes you just have to like be super transparent. I don't know. I have like some proxies. I can like look at operational KPIs or the outputs, as we say, but can I really like justify and go into the specific outcome? Can I have like all that information at hand to properly know if like my input, my money, my whatever is actually creating some kind of like positive or additional outcome for that specific beneficiary group that you have at hand, right? So I think this is like normally like where all the conversations around impact they come back to, but meaning if we go back to like thinking about like challenges, I think creating like, of course, like a common terminology for impact is definitely like one that really sometimes can prevent or make it easier for one to fundraise, right? So either as like a fund manager or as an entrepreneur, if the LP or if the fund has like a different way of like looking at the impact that you're generating, what kind of impediments in this negotiation can there be? Or will they try to enforce their own kind of measurements into how you do business so that they can actually make you work within their own like portfolios? So I think it's a very broad and interesting like challenge that we have at hand when talking about like what kind of positioning I will have and who is it that will understand the kind of positioning that makes sense for me. And here's where I think that the ecosystem part of things becomes like even more relevant. So when looking back 2012, 13, 14 in Brazil, the ecosystem of impact was still like starting, you know? And then we had like to make a very conscious decision that if we wanted to be a relevant investor, we would need to actually like work to foster an ecosystem. So I hear you like Thomas and Lee, I hear you like Stefan and others, where many times if you don't foster these kind of structures, it becomes like much harder for you at all the other levels to do your investments, create your innovation, create the right connections, because you do need this kind of support network at the end of the day. And when I actually like arrived in Germany 4 years ago, I was a little bit like underwhelmed with like how the ecosystem was actually like developed. And looking back now 4 years later, like so much has happened that is like so cool to see around. Like the other day, I think was like Sifted that released a new list of like impact funds and impact angels. And it was like, wow, I don't think I know half of them, you know? So it's really like becoming a bit more mainstream. So if I were to compare challenges that we have like nowadays back to like 2013, for instance, I think our lives as like impact-driven people is becoming like much easier for good and worse, especially because like climate change is at our doorstep and all of a sudden people say, I think we have to look at that. And it became like trendier, but also it can be like a trap where can we put everybody into the same bucket, right? And does it matter? Yes, no, I don't know. So I saw that like a few people like joined us like later. I don't know if you were like listening in before or not, or if you have any contributions, please feel free to jump in. And of course, I would like to then like end in a positive tone, like talking also about like the rewards that we have in this kind of journey. Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe we can like talk also a little bit about like rewards, because it is like challenging. It is tough to actually come up with like new models, especially when investors don't really get what you're trying to do, or even like the investees, they look, wow, you do have a different approach. What does that actually mean to me at the end of the day? But definitely, I think Thomas like wrote like smiles are part of like the rewards that we have, because one of the beautiful things, at least for me, is whenever you have like purpose that is very strong, like a vision that is very concrete, you really manage to bring like so many people on board, be it like networks, communities, or just like people like working with you. And it makes a whole big difference, you know, and you see that actually the teamwork is for me like one of the most fun parts of it, but also when you get like to help others, it's just think it's like, the smiles, they're like really countless. And I don't think there's anything more rewarding than trying to make the world a better place. I think that this whole spectrum of like impact investments, empowering entrepreneurs is also like something that I it's the multiplier effect, right? So like Stefan, what you were saying, what were you like saying about like the influencers, right? How is it that you like multiply the knowledge and the empowerment so that like more people can be just like spreading out the word about what is it that we are truly trying to achieve with our investments and businesses. And sometimes it's a little bit of like pride, I can say, but when you manage to break stereotypes and actually prove that things can work despite all odds, I think this is something that's like, we told you that's gonna work. It is possible. I think for me, whenever I see like a new research saying, yeah, impact investments are not philanthropy, they're just like beating market rate returns, this is where like, you know, friends, from back in my banking days, you remember that you used to like laugh at me, look at the numbers, you know. I think this is something that is also like quite rewarding. And just like sometimes like being able to bridge the worlds, create like terminology and expressions and like, you know, analogies that allow more people to say, huh, there is maybe something, you know, maybe this makes much more sense than what I was thinking. Maybe just tech for tech is not enough. Money for money is not enough. And all of a sudden you can really catalyze much more of this transformation, because at the end of the day, if we really want to achieve the goals of 2030, we need everybody in the same boat. We need everybody in the same journey. So I think a lot, my encouragement always to whenever people are talking about impacts, like who else can you bring and can you convert to the mission, right? Who else can you just like break some of these like stereotypes and allow them to see that maybe there is like something else that you have to do. It is a little bit more work, but it's worth it. You know, I started like a process within the company because of course, yeah, when you're hiring, not everybody's coming from the impact world. And it was this whole like living impact mission that we had to actually say, how does impact translate in every operational area of the team, of the company? How would you perceive as an individual your role to make impact be leveraged within what you do on a daily basis, and then also have a repercussion on your client base? And it's a process where people say, huh, impact is not just like this additional thing that we look at, it's part of how we do business. And I think this is like where the power actually lies of really getting many more people to be excited about the topic and not only think about like the business model itself, but like all kinds of strategies, be it like marketing, logistics, finance, people, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't know if anyone would like to contribute a little bit more of like rewards that you see happening in your everyday.
I think you're touching in on an interesting point, and I just want to say, in the work I'm doing, I'm contacted every week by many investors who wants to get in contact with all the startups I've been working with. And I'm thinking, how come it's so difficult for investors to actually get close to actually understanding startups? I see where you're working. You're taking this step further. You want to jump into this gap and bridging it. And but I think it's still a difficult path. I mean, you are looking at it from your side. I'm mostly looking at it from, of course, the entrepreneur sides in mostly Africa. How do they get into tapping into, I think, a lot of available funds, but the VCs are not ready to take the risk. They're not ready to understand how to assess startups or opportunities in Africa the same way as I would do. So they are looking at how can we get more information from someone like me or someone I think like you, and that's why I think it's a great move that you're doing, but it's also a risk. I hope it'll pay off, so it'll change the whole perspective of funding in Africa. And funding maybe not on the bigger tickets, but perhaps a bit smaller tickets than normally. On the other hand, I think an event like this, Thomas, is trying to look at maybe solutions that are not there yet, you know, or connect people that can look at solutions. Why are we involved in this ecosystem? What can we contribute with? Are there solutions that are in between what's up there already?
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe just like one thought. The whole like VC industry really operates like who's doing what, and where is like the overall money going to. There is a lot of FOMO, and there is, yeah, not so often that you see a lot of like people that are really trying to embrace the proper risk. You know, that's what I was saying. Like, okay, who's doing that? Where can I prove? You know, is there already like something that it has like a history that I can like bet my numbers on? So if you say, and like Latin America now is like becoming hot, right? Because all of a sudden people say, are there like enough opportunities in Europe and the US that, you know, haven't been untapped? And all of a sudden like Latin America is hot. But like several years ago, it's just like, you're doing VC in Latin America? What? Are you crazy? And I think it's like similar to also like what I see happening in Africa a little bit, you know. A few funds that say, well, we do have like one foot there, one foot somewhere else. So we do understand like the ecosystem. We do understand like the how the culture locally actually work, because many times what happens is like if a VC has like a pure kind of hat of everybody, and here I'm going to go into another topic, which is like diversity of backgrounds, ethnicity, gender, etc. The VC world is the industry is like super homogeneous, you know. If you don't know and if you don't relate to what is actually happening on the ground, it is much harder for you to actually like develop the empathy and understand the opportunity, right? So when we're talking about like women, for instance, like before even talking about like Africa, how many female entrepreneurs actually get funding? How many female like LPs are there? How many female GPs are there? And it affects like the whole chain. And I think it's the same when it comes like to Africa. And slowly, I think like now within like the fintech space, Africa is slowly becoming hot because, well, it is an untapped market, and a few brave ones were there and proved that there can be returns, right? So I think that's one of the issues that I see with the traditional VC industry, where going to like the next frontier is not for so many. It's much easier just like to tag along on what everybody is doing. And that's also like valid for impact. They say, okay, who else is doing? Where are they doing? You know, am I going to be the first one? Am I going to be the first to have like the hit and show like a default in my portfolio because it didn't work? It's just like, wow, it's crazy. And when actually it was supposed, like it's VC, it's venture capital. It's like it's supposed to be risky. It's not everything that is going to really thrive. And if we don't do like these small, very early stage investments, it's very hard that you actually see the whole like industry and ecosystem flourish. That's how I see it, at least.
I agree, and I like the what I'm thinking is that is there any way to actually innovate in terms of the VC industry? Is there, what direction do we need to go to? I know they always want to be on the forefront, but is there any way of automating things so we can make sure that we can validate companies in a different way, so you don't spend a lot of resources validating companies that will not be profitable? And I know that
I think we can open a whole like session on that. No, the thing is, I think we can open a new session, Thomas, to only talk about that.
Exactly, but and that's why I'm really here, and I want to say it's so interesting to talk with you in this session here. And but is there any way to actually just take a step backwards, looking at it as a potential, as an innovation space where we have not been yet, because the VC industry is, you know, kind of conservative? Is there any way of going forward in that direction?
Stefan, do you happen to know, let me just say this one thing, Stefan, do you happen to know Unconventional Capital?
Not sure.
Okay.
I regularly check up on everything, but please send me a link.
Okay, I will do, because they just launched their platform, their tech platform, and I think they're doing exactly what you just mentioned and what you think would be needed in Africa. And they're doing that for Kenya, for Tanzania, Nigeria, and Rwanda, I think. They're based in Munich, and what they do is basically they look at, they basically try to only look at the founder potential of people and thereby bring down the costs of due diligence, right? They don't really do a due diligence on the company, but just look at the entrepreneurial potential of the founders, and then basically give them, I think, between 10 and 50,000 in as a revenue share loan as well. So they basically pay that back. The entrepreneurs pay it back over time with their revenues, and thereby they also exit and they don't take equity. And yeah,
it's amazing. And I think I mean, if someone contacts me and say,
Stefan,
hey,
Thomas saying pause. We're over time already.
Unfortunately, I have to interrupt you, but I also enjoy that very much because this is exactly what I was hoping for. So there are 3 people that are now connected, Julia, Felipe, and Stefan, and I'm sure you will have something to talk about. So please get together inside of Gita or anywhere else and continue this discussion. If you do it inside of Gita, we'd love to host that. Just reach out to me and then we can have that conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody who joined us in this conversation. It's always good to go into these topics with other passionate people.
Thank you, Julia.